And Bill's going to talk to us today a little bit about him earning his EFC, which again was 10 missions. He's going to talk about his training again, as Ed did a little bit, but he's going to be in a little bit more detail about the training he took and how they did, and then about his 10 missions. Bill Ebersole, 466.
Thank you very much, Robert. You know, I got in the Air Force because I was about to be drafted. I just turned, I was 17 when I went to the University of Florida as a freshman in September, and I was 18 in October, and joined the Air Force Reserve because they kept saying, you know, you might not have to go to war to get in reserve. And I said, well, that sounds good. And especially it sounded good because I didn't really want to end up in the infantry and fight the war in a foxhole. That didn't appeal to me at all. And I said, you know, get in the Air Force, you're way back away from all that action. And so I said, well, that's a good place for me. So I joined the Air Force Reserve on the 31st of October of 42. And 3 months later, they activated the reserve, and I was in. And I'd never been up in an airplane. And so I said, well, you know, it's amazing that they could take a person like me that had never been in an airplane in his life and train you to be a fighter pilot with a lot of confidence. You're one of those hot rock pilots with a lot of confidence so you could do most anything with an airplane. And I told a few people, I don't remember ever being afraid of anything. I should have been afraid. And he said, well, somebody told me later, the reason you weren't afraid is that at that age your brain isn't fully developed. But anyway, it was an experience. I went into the Army in February of 43. And I don't want to go through all the training I did, but the Air Force did a magnificent job of the training because they moved us along steadily. I went through a primary with a PT-17, about 60 hours of basic with BT-17, a BT-13 out of Montgomery, Alabama, and then I went to Craig Field Settlement at advanced training. At the end of my advanced training, I had about 10 hours of P-40. And then after a few delays, I got down to Bartow, and I started flying the P-51s. We had it in model A, B's, and C's. You'll notice the difference between those is that that's the fuselage doesn't have the bubble on it. The 50B's and H's had a bubble on the canopy. Those were nice planes to fly. But we got down there, and I had a roommate that was a real eager beaver. He loved it. He said, Bill, what we need is all the time we can get in the P-51. So we were volunteering for everything. In fact, before we got out of Bartow, we were actually doing what the instructor was doing, is pulling tow targets with other pilots. But we were adding to our time and adding to our experience, and we thought that was real important. We turned out that, and I thought later since I was there, that I was selected. I didn't go, I wasn't one of the original pilots in the 506 group. I joined, and we were about to finish our training in the fall of 44. I got about all we were going to get along in October, November. And the 506 started in October with their flying and all, and I didn't fly with them until early January. There were only a few missions with them over here, so I liked some of the experience they had there. We weren't getting good training there in Bartow. One reason I'm sure that I was chosen to be in that group, I was a second lieutenant barely. I just only been out of I guess a year in training. It was my roommate and I spent a lot of time. His name was Al Colley, he was from Georgia, a good friend, and I've been rooming with him in Bartow. And both of us were chosen to go with the 506 group. But the two of us had the best gunnery scores of any of our pilots, any of our friends there at Bartow. And the reason was is these guys were shooting at the target way, way back. And we were a bit more adventuresome, and we would get up even with if the true target was here, we'd get up close to it, we'd dive down, make a coordinated turn, and blast the target real close. And we got where that's the answer. Why shoot it way, way off? And we'd get pretty close, almost dangerously close, because that thing had about a 30-pound lead weight on a steel bar, and it was about a 60 or 70 foot target with a wire mesh. The way they could tell, if you were hitting the target was if they could hit the gun, I guess the bullets, in colored, kind of a chalky coloring, and it would leave that trace of that color, red, green, yellow, blue, whatever. And so you identify the plane that was shooting the target. But anyway, this is the way we did it. The ground coloring we found was a lot of fun, because we decided, you can't, why waste your bullets way off, get up close. So we'd get as close as we could. We didn't hit the targets, but we got pretty close to it. And we got good gunnery scores. And we were running about 40 to 50% on hits, but a lot of those people get 5 and 10% hits. And I'm sure that was why we picked out to do that. I graduated from flying in class of 44D. That means the D meaning January, February, March, April, before that, 44D. And so did Ed Linfante. I found out the other day we're in the same class and graduated. I was a bit younger than Ed at that age. But anyway, we joined they split our squadron into 2 different groups as we left the States. Half the groups went with an aircraft carrier, with the planes on the deck of the carrier, not flying from the deck, but being transported. The rest of us went with the ground crew. And I was on the ground crew side, and so was Ed. About half the pilots were with the air echelon. But they went on and started flying right away. We got to Iwo, and we didn't have an airfield for us to use during the war. So we had to sit around and prowl the island, probably dangerously more than we expected. But it was funny, some of these guys had never been out at all in any adverse situation, and they didn't know what to do with the fire. We had to warm our own food. They were putting cans of beans on the fire without punching a hole in them. And you know what happens to that? My wife said, I got to tell you, I was an Eagle Scout. And so I held this guy's head, even though I was the youngest. I knew what to do. I just didn't when I was out in the woods. But that was kind of what we were up to. We started building our own quonset hut. First we lived in wall tents. And we'd only been a week or so since the Japanese came out of hiding and ran through one of the other earlier groups that arrived, I don't know whether it was the 15th or the 21st, and killed about a dozen pilots while throwing hand grenades in the book thing. Well, the first week or two, I slept underneath my cot with it made up like a person was in it. But we had 45 pistol cocks by your side, but we were scared to death that we were going to get. Anyway, the Seabees did a good job of building that. And after we'd been there about 5 or 6 weeks, we got our airstrip finished. They brought all the planes up from Iwo Jima, and we were in business. That was the end of May. My first mission was a dive bombing mission where we dropped bombs on Jima. And that is the place, that's the little island that first President Bush was shot down flying a Navy plane. And so it wasn't it was pretty dangerous. They had a bad reputation. They were, even to the point of being cannibalistic for a while if you get anybody there. And there's some evidence of that. Several stories I've seen since about that. Our missions, the first couple of missions I went on were escort missions. I saw 3 planes on one mission, the first mission I flew. I guess they were looking out for me because they knew I was young, but I flew on the colonel's wing. One thing I could do was fly formation, and I figured that, I'd stay with it. My roommate was the opposite. When you see a plane, he'd take off after. The heck with everything else, he wanted to get him an airplane. But I was staying in. But anyway, we had 2 missions, and all I ever saw airborne planes was 3 airborne planes that day, 11 o'clock high coming in. I saw him call about it, and my flight turned away from him. The colonel didn't want to leave that for the rest of the guys, but we saw that by the time I turned around, the squadron behind us shot those 3 planes down. I saw 2 parachutes coming down. After we did the escort missions, we started, and they weren't coming up anymore after the bombers. And so we we'd go in and usually have an airfield assigned to attack. And we'd drop down at about from 15,000 feet down to treetop height and come in on across an airfield. Of the 16 planes in the squadron, 4 would do the top cover because it's pretty vulnerable when you're down below and you don't have much maneuver. And the other 12 planes would line up, not wingtip to wingtip, but side by side, 50 or 60 yards apart, and go across the field. We didn't want to make but one pass because after we woke them up, we didn't want them all out there shooting at us. But we were flying very fast, so fast that from the high speed, I would say probably over 400 miles an hour going over. And the Japanese weren't used to planes that would do that. But he would fly and it'd go nose down. And so if you wanted to shoot a target, you had to pull up and then come down on it. And that's kind of tricky because part of your protection is being amongst all the other planes. But anyway, we did that. And I had credit for one bomber destroyed on the ground. Most of our missions were strafing missions after the first couple. Once or another. We had on one mission, I got into a train station, and we shot at a train, and I would have really done some damage, except I shot the wrong end of it. But you couldn't tell which one was going which way. But we had my flight leader named Jose Diaz. Jose said, "Bill, let's get the hell out of here before you run into somebody." There was a bunch of our planes, and they're really having target practice on those trains. And so we circled out and went out into the inland sea and found a boat, a shipping boat out there, and way out away from the shore. And so Jose, I was following him, he made an attack on the ship, and I came behind him. I did the same thing I'd done in gunnery school. I turned it, got over the final approach, and lowered 10 degrees of flaps, and trimmed up the ball, got it all centered, and kind of glided in. And most of my bullets were hitting. As I'd done in Iraq. So we pulled up and circled around. Probably wouldn't have done this if we had, where people could have shot at us. But we're out over the open ocean. We made a second pass, and it did the same thing. I lowered another 10 degrees of flaps and kind of glided in on it, and really was successful in pretty well destroying that boat. But and one thing I was never really proud of, one day I didn't have anything to shoot at. And I was shooting at some of these electrical installations and other things, but I didn't want to carry up with the billets all the way back to where I started from. But some poor fellow was going across a bridge on a bicycle. Well, I knew where my bullets were going. So I said, I don't have a little bit of fun. So I shot over this way, and he was way over here. Just a little nervous just to know that I was around. And he ran over the side of the bridge, jumped down into the back. I said, that was the meanest thing I think I've ever done. But it was kind of funny. I was kind of tickled over. That was kind of the story of the way we did our strafing. On the way back on one of these missions, the flight I was in the four-plane flight overseeing the 12 planes that were running across on the deck, and we got hit by flak. And the fellow I was flying with was about only 50, 60 yards from us, Hill in Rosenberg. And he got hit and started losing his coolant. Some of the regular engine planes, we go pretty good ways with that kind of damage, but inline engine, we had a Merlin Rolls-Royce engine. And if it hit that and started losing your coolant, you're really in trouble. And we started back and we went, they have a submarine that would surface about a mile off the shore. So we could have radio contact with it. With any of our stations that you saw on the map, had radio contact with it. Oh, you get a drink of water. Will you hand me my water? But we were hit, and I was going back, after he was hit, I was flying with him back over the submarine and then out to the first couple of stops. We passed the one stop, one boat there that was a rescue boat. Started out for the second one, and his engine really started failing, and he was beginning to catch from fire. We were about 10 or 15,000 feet. And he knew he was going to have to bail out, so he did what we were told to do. He janited the canopy, and then he rocked his wheels, lowered his flaps, slowed it down, and it was going to bail out over the left side, which the way the prop turned this way, go over the left side, you get a little bit of help from whatever power that was left there. But he hit the horizontal stabilizer when he bailed out. And he fell down through some clouds, and we circled around out there for half an hour, and it's all we could afford to do. We called the Navy, and they were on their way over there to this point. But we never saw him again, and he was never found. On the way back to Ewo that day, my mission that day was 8 hours and 20 minutes, which is the longest mission that I've been on. And that's a long time. We got back, and as we were near Ewo, I pulled up to Jose, and I said, Jose, we got a problem. I said, my navigation tells me we're missing the hour. And he said, well, let me fly your wing then, because I had a little bit of trouble with my navigation in his radio. So we turned on mine, and I made almost a 90-degree turn. And it wasn't more than 10 or 15 minutes before we could begin to see South Mount Surabaya. So we did make it back tonight. They told me I had about 5 more minutes of gas. So we used it up. I want to tell you a little bit about how we did the gas. Once we take off on these missions, we get up to altitude, the cruising altitude, sometimes 12,000, 15,000 feet, sometimes a little more. We pull the throttle, pull the RPM. Some of y'all know that we were flying usually about 22, and this was from memory, I mean 65-year-old memory. I didn't see this down anywhere. But we pulled the RPM down to 1,600 RPM. We wouldn't have to change the manifold pressure, but we left around 32, 33, somewhere on in there. Again, that's just from long time memory. But that way we can conserve our fuel. One thing I was talking last night at dinner with Robert, I said, you know, you can tell what the RPM of the plane ahead of you is. And I said, how do you do that? He said, well, you got your propeller going, and you look through there, and you can see the shadow of the propeller of that you're looking at. Either planes, they don't do this with jets anymore, but you can tell the speed of their engine. And we kept checking with each other all the way. If you go behind the plane and you see that tail going around the back, means he's using too much gas and may not get back. So we tell each other, there's a big help if you keep track of that. Try that sometime. Look through one fan into another fan, and you see the shadow of the blades of this interesting thing. I think that's good. Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Ebersole. We'll have a Q&A period, and you guys can ask questions to the pilots here. And then that'll be about 15 minutes, and then I'd like to have a short dedication to the Planes of Fame new fighter outside here that you're all going to see in a second, Valley 607, Captain J.J. Grant. So basically some of the statistics, which are quite heavy and impressive for these gentlemen. Let me get down to there, and then we'll open it up to question and answer. 140 strikes are flown against targets in Bona Nouns, which were nearby, Iwo Jima, which we talked about. And they'd go over a dive bomb and practice bombing and stuff, getting used to flying long distances and then finally going to Japan. 234.5 confirmed aerial victories. 219 Japanese aircraft destroyed on the ground. And numerous other targets shipping. In fact, Bill didn't tell the story about taking out an aircraft carrier with three of his buddies, but he actually went in on an aircraft carrier and they almost got shot down because there's a lot of firepower on an aircraft carrier, and Bill was the last one in, and actually on his pullout he figured about 600 miles an hour, almost retain compressibility where you'd actually lose control of the plane or the wings fall off because you're going at such high speeds. And Bill actually blacked out from the G-forces coming up over the top of that aircraft carrier, and luckily recovered fairly quickly. But they did quite a bit of damage. We can't say enough about these people. They're my heroes. They are wonderful men that have come to us. I'm proud of them. I know our nation are. I hope everyone here is proud of these guys. They're heroes under adverse conditions, tremendous stress, tremendous. I don't know if you've ever sat in the P-51, but I cannot imagine sitting in that, let alone an American Airlines comfort for 8.5 hours, and realizing that this is war, this is hell. These guys are there. They perform the duty for their country, and our country is free because of them. I want to thank you. There he is, folks.
Time for me to wear my other hat. I want to just continue a little bit on that June 1st mission. There are some conclusions that come from being involved in it. Now, like I told you, we had early briefings, and the operations plan for the mission was made by pilots, but who were now operations personnel and not going to be involved in the actual mission. Now, as a young second lieutenant, at one of those briefings, I said, why are we flying out at the same altitude as the bombers? And of course, they gave me the morale boost thing and the fact about the minimum fuel burn. And I noticed that the killer June 1st mission, even though weather advised us not to go, the tops of the clouds were below 25,000 feet. And I ventured that what we should do, instead of flying out at the same altitude as the B-29s, we should implement a 200 feet per minute climb. That might consume an extra 50 gallons in getting over that front. We will get over it in no time doing that. And there's no reason for us to be flying at the 14,000 feet or lower level. We should start out with the intention of overflying that front because, as I mentioned earlier, some of the 15th and 21st pilots had avoided aborting by going around those fronts. And if they could do that, there was no reason we couldn't burn a little more fuel and fly over the front. And once over the front, we're going to gain a little bit back by descending. Well, we'll have to find a way back. And so we should be able to complete the mission. In other words, I concluded, and I could be wrong, but our top personnel in operations screwed up. They didn't think outside the box. They had a plan. Oh, this is how we always do it. Well, you got different circumstances. You got to think differently. I'm convinced, and I don't know if Grant is, that we would not have had to abort any mission if we went out and decided we were going to overfly the front by climbing right from Iwo Jima for the next 3 hours until we got to the bad weather and make it that way. And so the shame of it is that we lost some of the best pilots ever trained in fighters due to faulty planning. Now, what happened afterward, I'll never know for sure, because they don't confide in us brand new pilots, but Hap Arnold was head of the Air Force, And he came out to Iwo Jima, and he was thoroughly PO'd that we lost 24, 25 good pilots on that mission, all captains or higher primarily, and wanted to know what went wrong. And I understand some heads rolled, although I don't know which ones did. But this is a lesson in the fact that you've got to plan according to the situation, not just what was put in paper because you did it that way once or twice. So my conclusion is we wasted those lives. We wasted a lot of good pilots' lives for faulty planning. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take questions from the audience, and we have a gentleman that'll bring a mic over there for you. And if you have either Ed or Bill you'd like to respond, but go ahead, sir.
I'd like to ask, first tell a story to the youngest pilot there, and then tell them an amusing conversation we had late in the war with some P-51 pilots. We were F-4U carrier pilots, and we were on R&R on Guam toward the very edge of the war. And Applegate and I often be some of you young P-51 pilots, and we heard these stories, you know. And one of the young pilots told us when we asked him about getting back after those long flights, about being short of fuel, and he said, you know, we pour it on so we get back to the field before we run out of fuel. Now, we didn't say anything to each other, we just kind of looked at each other. And then I've often wondered when I heard those stories about having so much trouble in the storm, how much instrument training did you Army guys get to fly in bad weather?
We were well trained. We all had instrument cards. The P-51 doesn't have, well, it's got a artificial horizon, but the minute you tilt that more than about 30 degrees, it tumbles it. And so all you got left in the P-51 is needle ball and airspeed. And it's kind of hard. I challenged myself every time I had a chance to fly needle ball and airspeed. It's not easy. What you do is center the needle, center the ball, and then check the airspeed and not have it decreasing rapidly or increasing rapidly. But that's supposed to get you out of it. Now, I don't know how many of these guys could manage that, but that was about it. Once you tumble your artificial horizon and back more, and of course, you're all over the place up in the sky, especially in the storm. But that's the problem. We need the big planes like the B-29 don't have that problem. They are going in the bank more than 30 degrees.
So what did they teach about fuel control?
It's like,
what were they teaching you about fuel control?
well, fuel control, we did everything we could trying to save our fuel. We were very, very careful with it, but we knew we had to get back home with it. We had to save enough to get us home. But and that was, I think I had 5 minutes of fuel left when I got back on that. My longest mission was 8 hours and 20 minutes. Most of them averaged a little under 8 hours.
So what did you think of that young pilot telling us he poured it on at the very end so he could get back before he ran out of fuel?
No, I think you can't do that. Yeah, I think so.
Next question, sir.
What navigation aids were available to you for those long flights?
What navigation was available?
What navigation aids? Radio beam?
No, yeah, we had the little small thing we used to have, even most of our training, even the advanced training, AT-6, had a little, when we were taught to fly on a beam. And what we used was what we called an Uncle Donald receiver. And if you notice on the back of the P-51, right behind the pilot, there's two aerials. What happened is that if you can picture, they call it Uncle Donald because in Morse code, U is dot dot dash, and D is dash dot dot. When you merge those together and put them on a piece of paper, you'll see a common steady beam. So when you're aiming on some, we could home in with that. Now, all they had to do is transmit a carrier wave from the B-29 or from a submarine or from another plane. You can, anybody that wants to, then we can home in on that. And that's what we use most. We use it a lot. It was very good. We did have the same sort of the fixed station on Iwo, which is an aerial with the quadrants that you have in regular navigation in the States. And you fly in those things on fixing, but you can also home in with this radio. We call it a VHS, I think, very high frequency.
I'm just curious about these long missions. What did you do for food and bathroom? And how did you handle traffic?
Well, bathroom, they had a handy little thing you kept underneath the seat, and you pull it up, and then you had to figure out some way to use it. What you got? But it was kind of funny, this is a long mission, and we carried a little bit of water and stuff with us. But you see a nice formation going on, and one plane will all of a sudden do it like this. We'd say, I know what he's doing. But that was about it. Yeah. We got there, we could see that from our ship. We parked at Bloemfontein with a Dutch hospital ship. And the ground crew came over on that, and we were anchored off at Satan and anchored off from over down there for about 2 weeks. But we could see a lot going on the island. All these trip players going on. There might have been one or two out, but there were some stray cats and things around there. And we'd hear a haul, and then a machine gun. And that didn't make you sleep any better.
I just add for those that don't know, just before the 5 and 6 landed, the previous fighter groups that were there, the Japanese at 3 o'clock in the morning on March around 15th or so, 300 of them came out from under the ground, and the Marine Guard at the time had basically were, I don't know, changing guard or whatever, but they were unprotected. They got into the fighter 10 area, and they started throwing hand grenades and bayoneting and sorting and shooting pilots as they slept. And they actually picked up weapons of their own and fought back until I think an Army group, or probably Marine, but the Marines came in and were able to come back in and eventually kill over 300 Japanese that came in that night in a night battle. So about 19 pilots were killed, and that was quite a terrifying event. And that was like the day after is when our Captain House, our fighter pilot, showed up, and he flew in and landed, and he said there was nothing but Japanese bodies everywhere. And so it was a very terrifying event.
What's the fastest flown in a 51 and level flight?
Level flight probably, of course the indicated airspeed and true airspeed are different, but the indicated airspeed is what's indicated on your instrument dial, and that would usually run about 250, 225. And again, this is 65 years ago. I'm trying to remember back, but that's about what it would be. Of course, the fastest I've ever been, I mentioned I was going over 600 miles an hour straight down, straight in an aircraft carrier. And we shouldn't have been in that position, but I was.
Use the microphone.
About 440. The maximum you could fly with P-51 was about 440 miles per hour. It was redlined at 505 on the gauge. You didn't want to go to 505 because if you were altitude, you would go much faster and you were going to strip the wings.
Yeah, I've read a couple things since I left that many years ago that about planes losing their wings, and I said, and I was going too fast. But most of the time, if you notice when you're on the highway around a curve, most of the attention you get of wanting to leave the road is at the last part of that turn. That's where it seems to catch up. In the same way as when you fly. When you fly down, you don't black out here. You black out, fortunately, like this, when you're heading back up again.
questions, sir? And if you could wait for the microphone.
Just one piece of information. 2 years ago, I was up at the Reno Air Races, and Steve Hinton Jr. was flying a P-51, set the speed record for that race, and it was just under 500 miles an hour, like 491 or something like that. He also was the youngest pilot to ever win that race. So I'm sure that P-51 is modified a little bit more than what you were flying, but that was the speed up there at that time.
His brain wasn't.
At 550, he's lapped at over 550. Yeah.
His brain wasn't fully developed yet.
All right, I'm sorry.
It's the last one. Go ahead.
I was wondering about the name that was given for this Dutch ship. Was it possibly one of those that was carrying the Flying Tigers, the Burma earlier? They were something Fontaine.
Yeah, Bloemfontein, I believe I showed a picture of it. It was a Dutch hospital ship, but I don't believe you get.
No, it was a hospital ship. Most of the ground crew was on that ship with us, and they had to, they resided in the holds of the ship, so they didn't see daylight very much on that cruise. And of course, being amongst the fighters going in, fighter personnel going into combat, we were given the prime location of a big hospital ward, and we had nice sleeping accommodation. But we did have to go take turns going down there, and then an officer down below deck at all times. So we do that short straw every once in a while. I've got to tell you one real quick story. I've always looked young. I had my wings on about 3 days, they were real bright and shiny, and I was walking down the street in Selma, Alabama, and a sergeant saluted me, and I saluted him back. He said, "Excuse me, sir, may I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure, Sergeant, what is it?" He said, "How old are you?" But I've always looked young.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, that's all the time we have. So, the moment I've been waiting for all my life. All those from the 506 fighter group, members and friends, would they please stand? All those that are here. And to remain standing, please. Okay. Captain J.J. Grant, my father, he was kind of a hellion on wheels. He was a bit of a John Wayne on Iwo Jima. He liked to command things and get people involved in sports and was a leader and always remained that way the rest of his life. So it's a great honor today to have his plane flying again in the skies. And I'll tell you a very short story on her. Here she is as depicted fighting, shooting. I always have a little trouble with this kind of thing. It'll probably pop up here in a second. But anyway, that was a picture of shooting favorite target, which was the locomotives. My dad loved to hit the locomotives, especially the steam ones, because they made such a show of the steam flying up in the air. Yeah, boy, I can see that. The name Dolly comes from, as I said earlier, my sister was about 3 months old. She looked like a little doll. We actually have a picture of her. Sorry, that's not working. But and so we named her Dolly. And what transpired from that point on is that every time my dad wrote a letter to my mom, which I mentioned that I had about 100, and I read them quite often, he ends with, "Send my love to Dolly." So after 67 years, Captain J.J. Grant can again say, here's my mom and Dad on leave. This would have been taken just before he left for Iwo Jima. And you can see Dolly looking quite the doll. And of course, there's always got in, she must have known she was going to be a P-51 plane at one time and in the future, because there's always that proverbial glamour shot. And that's a wonderful picture, but you know, she knew, she says, I'm going to be a P-51D Mustang, I can see it. And there's my dad there, nice picture of him. And here's a picture that was taken on Iwo Jima by that look photographer. The picture was taken, as we saw earlier, by Lou Mustine. And this was taken by Dad on his wing after returning from a mission on Dali, writing up his mission's notes, sitting on his parachute, as you can see. Looking quite stressed, by the way. And so, in closing, I will just say, and if you could open the hangar doors, please. That in 67 years, Captain J.J. Grant can send his love to Dolly one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, the most beautiful plane I've ever seen in my life, and I'm so honored that the planes plane has decided to paint this plane, Dolly 607, 462nd Fighter Group, Iwo Jima, 1945. Thank you.